everyone who's able to join for this Prometheus OTel interoperability panel, which David reached out to us to see if we could get some end user feedback on making sure that Prometheus and OTel play nice, which is always awesome. So we've got, I believe, 4 panelists, correct me if I'm wrong, who will be sharing their thoughts. And David is our moderator who will be asking questions. And why don't we get folks to introduce themselves, start with David, and then we'll have our panelists introduce themselves.
Sure. I'm David Ashpole. I work for Google. And right now I'm working with the Prometheus OTel work group, and we're trying our best to make sure that the protocols, the exporters, all the pieces that integrate OpenTelemetry and Prometheus together work well and consistently, and help users that are using both to have sort of a good experience.
Awesome. Next panelist. Anyone want to hop in?
I can start.
Awesome. Cool.
Hello, everyone. I'm Iris. I work as a senior observability engineer at Miro. So my life surrounds around Prometheus and OpenTelemetry recently. So yeah, it's nice to be here.
Cool. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Nicolas Takashi. I'm anything engineer at Coralogix, like currently working on observability unit. I'm a Prometheus operator maintainer and also Persys maintainer, and I've been working with trying to get some code into Prometheus to help with the Prometheus 3.0 and OTelP ingestion as well. And my daily base is around Prometheus, OpenTelemetry, metric collectors, and so on. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you. Let's see.
My name is Vijay Samuel. I help with observability at eBay. I think I've met most of you. Nice to see you all again.
Yeah, good to see you.
And then our last panelist, I think, is Dan.
This Dan?
I hope so. I don't think we've actually met.
Hi, yeah. There's so many Dans. So, hey, I'm Dan Brummett, Senior Manager of SRE at Home Depot for the store and payments systems. So we use a lot of the OTel and observability adjacent tools.
Cool. Great to have you. All right. So let's see. Why don't we go person by person and just give an overview of roughly what your observability stack looks like and how you're using Prometheus and OpenTelemetry in that stack. And why don't we start? We'll go in reverse order. So Dan, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So we have we observe services across a wide range of compute environments. That includes the data center, which are on-prem virtual machines, the cloud, which is GCP, primarily GKE, primarily Kubernetes, and also in our stores. So those are primarily small clusters inside of our stores, where we are also running OpenTelemetry collectors, and we are also running in parallel to them Prometheus installations as well. So the usage of OpenTelemetry as regards to Prometheus is in some cases just the typical, hey, it's Kubernetes in the cloud, it's GKE, and we want to have multiple different projects that we can share our metrics across all these different GCP projects. But the really that's fine. I think that's largely that. I don't think that's any groundbreaking stuff happening there. For us, we have challenges is in our store environments where it's, these things are miniature data centers. Our stores we have a miniature data center in the back of every single store with a lot of racks of network and server equipment. And we want to be able to make sure that stuff is actually working and our customers are happy. The network connectivity is spotty. Some of them are offline every single day. Some percentage of them are offline. Being able to backfill metrics is a challenge. So, hey, the metric was collected at the store level, but then shipping it up to a central Prometheus level, sometimes that backfill just doesn't work because of timestamps and stuff I'm sure that you all are aware of. And the collection of it is the configuration across a fleet of devices, a fleet of services is, being able to configure all that is also kind of a challenge for us. We're getting better at that on the Kubernetes side, but that's a challenge that exists, right?
Great, thank you. Vijay, tell me about what your setup broadly looks like and which pieces of Prometheus and which pieces of OpenTelemetry you're using together.
Sure. So starting with the instrumentation, right? Like we for the most part we standardize on a mix of the Prometheus Java client and Micrometer for Java applications. We use the community supported Prometheus client for JavaScript. And basically these expose everything else that's not considered managed. So Java and JavaScript are our managed languages, which means that there is a framework that people can build on top of. Everything else is the wild, wild west in the sense for Go, people use the standard Go client. And there's Python and few other languages that are there as well. All of these expose Prometheus endpoints today and are scraped by OpenTelemetry collectors that are deployed on every Kubernetes cluster that we host internally. This is the breadth of all our metric use cases that are there, more than 95%. There is a smaller group of metric use cases that send in directly into our gateway APIs, which can understand more proprietary formats, but they go through sanitization and whatnot before entering into our metric store. And finally, there's also the newer breed where we are trying to directly encourage some of the use cases to use the OpenTelemetry SDK to instrument and then use gRPC into the collector, enrich, and then write into the backend. The backend is predominantly Prometheus first, meaning we use the Prometheus SDK to build clustering and replication on top of the Prometheus storage engine. So all the characteristics of Prometheus still apply because the same head block and everything stay the same, and we use object store backed by Thanos for long-term store. So over time, we want to get to a place where we wean off people from things like Micrometer and Prometheus client to just use OpenTelemetry SDK, because on tracing, we are 100% on OpenTelemetry today. And we are starting to look at logs as well. So over time, we want metrics to be within the same fold.
Great. Thanks, Vijay. Nicolas.
Well, ours like quite simple. At the moment, we are leveraging OpenTelemetry collector for traces and recently starting with logs. And metrics we are evaluating because at the moment we are like using a mix of Prometheus servers and Prometheus agent to have multi-writing metrics from many different places. And our main idea is replacing the Prometheus agent by the OpenTelemetry collector and leveraging all the OpenTelemetry pipeline capabilities But at the moment, like we note a lot of like OpenTelemetry collector consuming more resources than the Prometheus agent, like in different aspects, and this is what is blocking us a bit because we are running like very large, like a huge amount of metrics we are collecting, and like replacing the collector by the agent at the moment is like kind of blocking because of the resources. Like, but we are pretty happy that maybe this might be solved when we have Prometheus ingesting OTel natively. Like you don't need more the conversions between OpenTelemetry and the Prometheus format, at least during the remote writing process. And the same idea of replacing maybe Prometheus client by the OpenTelemetry SDK and implementing the OpenTelemetry native since the instrumentation up to the storage layer. Mainly these at the moment.
Cool, thank you. And Iris, tell us a bit about how you're using OpenTelemetry and Prometheus together.
So for us, it is pretty simple, the architecture as well. We're using mostly Prometheus clients. We are not collecting via Prometheus, most of our metrics, especially custom metrics, but we're using Victoria metrics. But everything, it is Prometheus format because it is the open source Victoria metrics. We're also leveraging the node exporter, for example, that is our main exporter currently that we're using. And we are at the moment experimenting with OpenTelemetry, especially with host metrics, because it is more convenient for us to run OpenTelemetry collector and use all its capabilities for metrics collection, especially in the host level, than to use a node exporter. We also are experimenting in some cases because we are also running a monolith, except for Kubernetes. So we do use the Prometheus receiver, adding script jobs to OpenTelemetry to reach in some places that it is more difficult for us through Victoria metrics. But yeah, currently everything is Prometheus mostly, but we are thinking very hard to move towards OpenTelemetry SDKs because tracing is already in OpenTelemetry. Partly is still open tracing, but the goal is to move everything there. So we want to have a uniform way of collecting all our data.
Cool. Sounds like there's actually some similarity between most everyone. Sounds like I believe everyone's using primarily Prometheus libraries and instrumentation, but is thinking of moving to OpenTelemetry. I think, Iris, you touched on that a little bit. Is it just that you want consistency between like the way you're doing tracing, which is OpenTelemetry, and the way you're doing metrics, or is there something about the like OpenTelemetry instrumentation that's drawing you to migrate?
Well, we really like the OpenTelemetry SDKs for tracing. We've seen that it goes a long way, better than any other SDKs before. So considering that we are using this for tracing, why not use it for the whole parts of the application for metrics in this case, and why not logging? So this is the main reason. Also, the infrastructure, not just SDKs, but the infrastructure makes it very easy, the way that it is very flexible for us to use the OpenTelemetry infrastructure. So that really helps in this case.
Thanks.
Hey, and David, I do want to call out that we are using the OpenTelemetry Java agent in production in stores, and some of our legacy stuff is still using different libraries for collecting metrics, for emitting metrics, exposing metrics. But the majority of our new services are using the OpenTelemetry, either Golang library or Java library to expose metrics. Yeah.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about challenges. So, Nicolas, why don't you start us off? I know you mentioned performance issues with the Prometheus receiver and the collector. What else during your journey of adopting Prometheus and OpenTelemetry together has really been a struggle for you, either that's still unsolved or that you were able to work through?
That's a good point. I think that what I struggled the most in the beginning was mainly UX, DX. I don't know how to properly call that, but it took me a little while to understanding, okay, we are the metrics, we are not pushing the attributes like resource attributes and something like that to the metrics, and then we need to enabling on the remote writing to send the metric info, so on, or configuring the collector to expose the resource attributes as metric labels. This took me a while to understand that. And after that, since I didn't start using the operator, the OpenTelemetry operator, to make the switching from the Prometheus receiver, to the I just forget the name of the service. The target allocator helps a lot on the problems to discovering targets using a lot of resources. But if you're not using the OpenTelemetry collector, you need to figure out yourself how to run the target allocator with the OpenTelemetry without the operator, this is easy to do, but I did need a lot of research and reading docs, issues, and so on to make it work outside of the operator. I think that mainly the issues that I found was related to UX at the moment.
UX in terms of getting it all set up, or UX after you have it all set up and you're trying to use the data that you've ingested?
Yeah, to make the thing set up, set up and configure the receivers, then understanding the little needs regarding the emoting writing the info metrics or not, and then the issue that I mentioned regarding the setup of the target allocator part of the OpenTelemetry collector. Once you have everything there, it's quite okay to use this, at least for us, because we already know about the difference between the metrics will not have the units. If we decide to not have the attributes, resource attributes as metrics labels, we need to join with the info metric and so on. Those kind of things we were aware, so we're pretty easy to get used to these little niches at the moment.
Cool, that's helpful. Dan, what's been a struggle for you, either or was a struggle or still is a struggle using sort of Prometheus and OpenTelemetry together?
Sure. So first of all, the Java agent, it only supports, so we tried to leverage it to add observability to legacy microservices that had no provisions for observability at all when they were created. They were running on a version of Java that the agent didn't support, and a version of Tomcat that the agent didn't support. So I'll tell you, adoption was real rough for the first 6 months because of that. I think it was Java 7, which is frustrating. So I don't know if that's something OpenTelemetry fixes, but it was a problem. And the other big one, I think, just the massive challenge is the configuration of OpenTelemetry to send any sort of telemetry over a push, like a pub sub, like any sort of messaging framework, like a pub sub or something. Configuring that was a little bit challenging for our engineers to get it so that we could actually, hey, we have the apps, the telemetry is collected from the apps locally, and then we're going to push it over some sort of messaging framework to get it to a central location. That was a little bit rough. And then the last one is the timestamps. And I know that it's not an OpenTelemetry only challenge. I know it's related to Prometheus, but if we have a location that's offline for a while, it comes back online and tries to send out the metrics that it was unable to send out while it's offline, those timestamps get totally borked. So, yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Vijay, what were some of the biggest struggles you overcame, and what's still left to do?
Our biggest struggles was scrape parity. And a lot of those through PRs that we filed on the collector, we have had addressed. Some of them are like, what if a label name started with an underscore? What if we wanted to disable sanitization for whatever reason? If it started with a colon. So these were all scenarios where initially Prometheus greatly differed from how OpenTelemetry collector was handling it, specifically on the exporter, the remote write exporter. So those are all solved now. So we don't have a problem, but that's one of our biggest concerns as we try to marry these two OpenMetrics and OpenTelemetry together. It's like we cannot afford any breakages. It should largely be rather than if going back to the document that was shared upfront, like it should be relax the requirement but still have ways to keep them as is, so that like when we try to move across versions, we don't have something break. And at the scale at which we operate, if something breaks, then it's a catastrophic breakage. So outside of that, I think forward looking on the collector itself, like we are more of in wait for a few features to come out, like being able to scrape native histograms and then report them into a Prometheus compatible backend and things like that. But we don't have complaints per se right now. Certain things could be better, like attribute processors could be a lot simpler to configure. They're very verbose right now, but those have nothing to do with the discussion we have right now.
So in summary, please don't break us.
Yeah, please don't break us. Yes.
Good feedback. Cool. And Iris, what struggles have you overcome? What struggles still remain?
Well, our struggles come mostly from the size of the organization. Our organization is quite big, so we just to envision it, we have at least 700 engineers that are using our observability platform, and we have to say most of them, of course, are front-end engineers, back-end engineers, so they're not. I'm not going to say fully proficient. They know their metrics and everything, but of course, if we make a big change and it's different, it could ruin their dashboard, it could ruin their alerting, and it is a very unpleasant experience. So that has been our challenge so far, and why we are moving very slowly, because if we change the way that we're collecting information and then the metrics, even if the format it is different, it could be a big change, and 700 people to get adapted to this change needs time. So we are going very gradual with it. Prometheus is known territory for everyone that works on the team and for all the engineers that have had experience with their metrics at the moment. So it's safe. Of course, OTel collector needs a lot of digging into the documentation, finding out more, testing and trials. So it makes it a bit slower, but mostly our biggest challenge that we're overcoming slowly, but still we are not there, is the experience of our engineers. So we don't ruin their dashboards, their observability performance in general.
Great, thanks. So I know we just touched on this a little bit, but I think it was actually a Prometheus blog that came out maybe a couple months ago about 2024 and some of the cool things that are coming. Some of the things I can think of are Prometheus Remote Write 2, OTLP support in the Prometheus receiver, Delta support for Prometheus, supporting dots, woohoo, stability, or even support for OTLP in some of the like Prometheus exporter ecosystem that already exists today. Iris, we'll start with you again. Which of those, or is there anything else that really stands out as something that you're really looking forward to having?
Can I say all of the above? So, yeah, I'm very excited for all of them. But if I had to distinguish, maybe the exporter and receiver, the version 2.0, it's going to be very nice. We are using it heavily or testing heavily with it right now. for our next move, and the support of dots. Why not? Again, it comes from a big organization, and having things more more uniform. It helps us a lot, and the experience of our engineers.
Yeah, well, that's actually really interesting to me. So you're really excited for Prometheus 2.0. I know when I talk to some people, they're like, well, there's Prometheus 2.0 and OTLP, but you're excited for Prometheus 2.0. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I was talking mostly about the Prometheus exporter and receiver in OTel Collector 2.0, right? That's what. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But yeah, I'm looking forward for Prometheus 3.0 as well. It's a great technology, and of course, the support of OTLP would be awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Let's go to Nicolas.
Cool. Wow. I guess it's a mix of like the remote write 2.0. I guess it's going to be massive. People is working hard to have a better protocol, consuming less resources. And since most of the people is using OpenTelemetry, they are remote writing for some Prometheus based system. Like having the remote writing 2.0 will help people saving resources, networking, CPU, and memory. Apart of that, I guess for the 3.0, of course, the OTLP ingestion, GA is gonna be nice. Of course, there are a lot of working that people is doing on the Prometheus team, making out of order samples ingestion be enabled by default. This is something very important to supporting OTLP natively. And I guess the next one, just to be a little bit different from Reed, I guess is the UTF-8 support and the metric label and name. I guess it's going to be nice. It's going to have some proximity between OpenTelemetry and Prometheus metric names and labels. I guess it's going to be very useful for usability and join the different communities.
Cool, thanks.
You're welcome.
Dan, tell me about what you're looking forward to.
Yeah, so the OTLP, that is a very cool thing. It will simplify some of our config once we get to the central GMP where everything's stored. I shouldn't use acronyms, to the central Google Managed Prometheus that we run, where all of our metrics are ultimately stored. One of the things that we're not really clear on is, hey, if we have data that is late, so if we have an OTLP bit of telemetry that has a timestamp that is 5 hours late, is that still going to get stored? And we haven't really been able to find the answer to that question, so we're just assuming that we'll test it and see once it comes out.
Yeah, we can think. I think Prometheus is going to support out of order writes. I'm not sure about the
it's Google. Already supporting, actually. It's already supporting. It's behind a feature flag, and you can just enable it and configure how much behind you want to ingest your samples.
Yeah, so the out of order writes thing, that's good. That's cool. It's the stuff that has a timestamp that's super behind is the one where it's really unclear. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. We can sync up afterwards. And Vijay, what are you excited about that's coming soon?
Actually, a lot of things. The OTLP ingest is interesting. The part that we would really hope for is that when we support it, it should be in a way that, okay, I instrumented this way on my application and I see it the same way on Prometheus. And no addition of _total or milliseconds or whatever, and keep the dots as is and things like that. But the part that's still somewhat unclear and we hope to see more clarity is how do the resource attributes and the metric attributes play along inside of Prometheus? What if there are name collisions and things like that? So that is somewhat unclear, but the fundamental thing is that we want the instrumentation and what they query to perfectly match, especially when they are just using gRPC to send out from the client directly. Delta temporality is something that some of the folks who started off directly on OpenTelemetry SDKs felt that, oh, this is nice to have, but it's not supported on Prometheus because you drop it on the floor in the collector right now. That's there. But outside of this this list, I know one of my wish list items is like exemplars persistence. That's something that that's not there yet on Prometheus. It's still the circular ring buffer that's there. Hopefully someone can get to it by 3.0. It's a nice thing to have, which we rely quite heavily on exemplars today.
Oh, cool. Actually, I learned something. I didn't know exemplars weren't persistent.
Yeah, so they're not persisted, and recording rules don't support it. For the latter, there's a PR which I never got to finishing, but someday it will be there. But the persistence is something that no one has picked up yet.
Oh, cool. Thanks, Nicolas. Okay, so one of the things that we've talked about a little bit so far, it seems like most people are in agreement that breaking changes are really hard. You have big organizations, big deployments, and like when we mess with things in terms of how things are translated, that can really have a big impact. And at the same point, it seems like there's at least some agreement within this group that we are excited for UTF-8 support, and we really want to be able to preserve the original OpenTelemetry data that is coming from the application. So Vijay, I'll put you on the spot. What do you think the right way to strike that balance is for us?
On your doc, I think I had a discussion with some of our leads internally as well. Like option one seems pretty appealing to us in the sense that at least today what we do is we separate installations between things that are going after Prometheus endpoints versus things that are emitting through gRPC directly. So it still gives us the opportunity to say that, hey, receiver, Prometheus receiver and remote write exporter, make sure that everything that Prometheus mandates today, enforce them on the scrape endpoints, but OTLP receiver and whatever is writing to our Prometheus backend, make sure that you are passing things the way that OpenTelemetry standards mandate. So it gives us a balance in keeping things as is, but things that we are moving to the next generation, we are moving it in the right way. So we have done this in quite a few evolutions where we used to run modified OpenTSDB first before we moved into Prometheus. That's how we bridged the gap initially. And this would be like a second generation where moving from, say, Prometheus semantics into OpenTelemetry semantics. So I would hope everything goes behind either a configuration or a feature flag to keep the current standardization configurable right to the specification that's there today on open metrics, and allow us to disable them as we need it.
So to be clear, do you think there's a difference between push and pull, or is it that it should keep, or that we should make it preserve the names by default, but always give people an escape hatch? I think you said that you like that, like open metrics and Prometheus scrape endpoints still follow the Prometheus conventions, but for pushing Prometheus remote write and OTLP, you want to be able to just preserve it as is. Do you think there's a distinction there?
Only for the OTLP. Prometheus remote write, however we feel it needs to be, it can be done whichever way. But for things that are coming in through OTLP, it should pass through the pipeline exactly the way that the sender intended it. That's what we're particular about. And on the scrapes, through either content negotiation or whatever, the behavior can be decided one way or the other. But we want to keep the scrapes as is because we have like more than 4 million scrapes that happen. And if something changes, then everything blows up at that point.
So don't break client side things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's very good feedback.
Do you see these push and pull use cases being in the same pipeline and the exporting side needing to automatically decide whether it does that translation or not based on the source, or would you expect to have separate pipelines configured for those use cases?
Right. I would vote for simplicity in the sense that we are okay to run 2 pipelines. And I don't, at least the way that we are deployed right now, I don't see a way in which both push and pull can coexist. So we would anyway run them as 2 separate pipelines. So it's probably fine. So no additional complexity required on the exporter side is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So just the configuration to decide which of those options you want, and then you'll set up a pipeline for each of them.
Correct.
Sounds good.
Correct.
Thank you.
Very cool. Thank you. Iris, I'll ask you a similar question. So you have a very large organization, right? You've said
700 engineers. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you using PromQL? You said you mostly use Prometheus and are familiar with Prometheus. Are you then using a lot of PromQL?
Yes. All PromQL for metric querying.
Have you seen the UTF-8 PromQL proposals or read? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I actually did skim through it right before this meeting. But I think that most of our issues, maybe I misunderstood, while I was going through the proposals, is the first one to change OpenMetrics to allow OpenTelemetry name. Would probably solve this. What makes me say that is that yes, there is differences, but usually when you are making queries, especially if you are offering that to a wide organization, you are using an engine that is very intuitive when coming to finding the attributes, the labels, the metric names. So as long as for example, a Prometheus backend is able to support OpenTelemetry metrics, UTF-8, that should solve the problem of a common engineer that does not know a lot about observability to build a PromQL query, for example. So that is a very good first solution for this.
I remembered my question now. Thank you, Iris. Nicolas. Oh shoot.
Forgot again.
Yeah, no, I remember it again.
That's fine.
So Nicolas, my question for you, part of what we're talking about here is kind of a difference between Prometheus best practices that have been codified as the OpenMetrics standard and the OpenTelemetry semantic conventions that have come and given new ways of, say, writing metrics or naming things. Are you happy with the way that these two ecosystems have evolved? And what do you think the best approach is for users to try and give them a reasonable experience? Should we sort of let them both be, or would you like to see the either OpenTelemetry or OpenMetrics change such that they align in terms of how things should be named or that sort of thing?
That's a really good and tough question, actually. Well, personal feeling, I guess, the Prometheus and OpenTelemetry communities that stay away for a little while, and we develop the things like very separately. And personally, what I would like to see, I think that maybe the OpenTelemetry, we should look more how the things is working when we have like high adopted systems like we have with Prometheus, like different from the tracing and the logging telemetry data type, where we have many different data stores, like on the CNCF space. For the metrics, we actually only have like Prometheus based project. Like maybe we should look more how Prometheus is doing the things and avoiding change much how this is working, because most in the end, what users want to do is to using the new things without need to changing or rewriting everything, if we look to how the metrics, how we are trying to unite the metrics between OpenTelemetry and OpenMetrics, we are trying to get some neutral moment here, where we agree with each other. But in the end, I guess we're going to introduce some change to the end user. And I guess that we can unite effort between the different communities to avoid this in the future. For example, when OpenTelemetry user group start discussing how metrics we would like, the feeling that I had is we didn't get close yet to the Prometheus ecosystem and so on, and trying to, let's try to solve most of the issues that we have in Prometheus, but without introducing a total different metrics naming convention, just to be easier with the end users,
Cool, thank you. That makes sense.
You're welcome.
Cool. Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Those are the questions I had prepared, and I really appreciate the feedback. I know we're ending a little early.
I guess since we're done a little early, we could, if anyone here who's in the audience wants to share their feedback, we can definitely open up the floor. Any takers?
I'd like to mention just one more thing, if it's okay. On the querying side as well, if we can keep the conventions fairly alike, there were a few options that try to distinguish things with double quotes and whatnot. That would be new things that we need to teach folks. Like if we are just introducing UTF-8 conventions into label names and metric names, by keeping the style exactly the same, that's still perfectly fine, because people are just gonna assume that we are just introducing new metric names and new label names rather than new conventions that they need to abide by. So if that can be taken into consideration, that would be great as well.
You're talking about having to put UTF-8 names inside of quotes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that was considered. I can give you pointers afterwards if you want to know the details of why it's a struggle.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I was at the Prometheus Dev Summit earlier today, and one of the things they were discussing was introducing OTLP export support into the Prometheus client libraries. Is that something that would be useful to this group here? And if so, one of the things they weren't quite clear on where they wanted to land was whether that OTLP support needed to be part of each Prometheus client library, or if it would be okay if there was a third party, or separate repo bridge that had to be combined with the Prometheus client library and an OTel SDK to make it function. Does anybody here have thoughts on that?
Can I chime in? Is that allowed?
Sure.
So in our environment, we use a lot of different metric solutions, and we are trying to reach standardization. When metrics are moving from one location to another, it's a mess when we have to have a bunch of different infrastructure set up to facilitate moving metric for Datadog versus moving metrics for Prometheus, right? It's just a mess. So as much as we can get into OTLP, so that way we can have everything moving through the same infrastructure for observability, that just simplifies our entire ecosystem. So the more we get into OTLP, the happier everybody on my teams will be. Yeah.
In our case, like if this proposal came out a couple of years ago, we would have probably pounced on it because at least the problem, some of our use cases, especially things that run like cron jobs, folks use the Prometheus client and use push gateway. Those use cases, we would have ideally liked to replace it with the non-push gateway based implementation, because the push gateway semantics don't necessarily work always for us. We just want to be able to send it into the gateway and put it on storage as quickly as possible. For those kinds, it's useful. But in today's world, if someone is trying to achieve such a use case, we'd rather recommend them to move to the OpenTelemetry SDK, because there is a defined pattern for us to go after in that.
Any other thoughts or feedback from anyone? Thank you, everyone, for joining. This was a really great discussion. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to having more community discussions.
Great. Thanks, Adriana.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye-bye.